Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and it's been a busy week for me. I've been absent for a few days and reading a little bit less, but that's because we had our final week of summer school, so I was proctoring lots of exams. I was reading less, but students were earning credits, and that's very important. One thing I was doing, though, was each night I was reading a story from this collection, Count Magnus and Other Stories by M.R. James, Montague Rhodes James. What a great name. In the introduction it said he was referred to as Monty by his friends. Now, his ghost stories sort of push out this idea of horror of the antiquarian ghost story. So most of his main characters are like, they have some connection to literature, classical history, art. They're able to access different artifacts, texts, get into places that are older. They have this excuse of they're traveling somewhere, and they're gonna just kind of like, they poke around some archaeological site that has some type of significance, but nothing major, no major significance, and then they uncover a little artifact there that becomes meaningful and significant. So, I of course am wearing my University of Arizona T-shirt as a my callback to antiquarian and classicists and so this was a really good volume of stories. I really enjoyed them. They kind of take two paths. There's the idea that a ghost is there for revenge. So somebody has done something and a ghost is there to either haunt that person and take revenge, often for a murder, or that the ghost is there and is sort of, in a sense, like taking revenge on a later generation. So a number of the stories fall into that category. And then most of the other stories fall into a category of a person who, like a sort of traveling professor, a professor who's on vacation, ends up stumbling upon an interesting artifact or an interesting statue, and that ends up releasing or summoning the ghost. So whistle and I'll call for you, or Count Magnus. Those were stories that fall into that other category, and I enjoyed both. I'm going to talk just very briefly about the mezzotint because I thought it was really interesting. And what I'll probably do is pick like one or two of these that I'll reread in October, and then sort of just do a little more in-depth discussion now that I've got this under my belt. But again, I really enjoyed these. So the mezzotint was interesting. You have a character who's at like a museum. He gets this weird art piece, and it's just a picture of a house, and it's unclear, and sort of like this manor house, and it's unclear where it is, what's going on. So he then sees what looks like a shadow down on the lower part of it. And then it appears that the next time he looks at this picture, the shadow's moved. Maybe it's like a weird creature or something that's moved. And then he and a friend see it, and they go and try to get evidence of like, okay, look, there's something in this picture that is moving. Now it's over at the house, and then it's not there, but there's a window open on the house that wasn't open before. And then, in the final one, they see it, and it's like now this creature is out of the house and it's running out of the frame again. And so there's this whole mystery, what the heck is going on? I mean, that's a weird, strange story. And so they go and trace out and find that, the owner of that manor once executed a poacher on his land, and then maybe that creature who's running out into is the ghost of the poacher, taking revenge on that, that the owner of that house. So it was a really, the whole thing hinges on the fact that they have this mezzotint where they can see the shifting, almost like tableau occurring. So again, very interesting. I really enjoyed these stories. The final one had this bizarre topiary and maze. The second to last one, Martin's Close, all took place as court documents from the reign of Charles II, and it was a ghost story mystery set, and they were all just court documents and testimony from, I guess at that time it would have been just over 200 years previously. So again, I really enjoyed these stories. I'm going to get there's another volume of these, and I'm going to pick that up at some point and read those. But it was suggested to me by Lillian to read those because I had mentioned reading Algernon Blackwood and enjoying him. And I see that connection. I see that connection particularly in stories like Ancient Sorceries. I think there's some evidence that M.R. James was an influence on H.P. Lovecraft. Not necessarily on like his cosmic horror stories, but more on some of his earlier stories that deal with like weird ghosty type occurrences. One difference I'll say, and it's a relief, like breath of fresh air difference, is H.P. Lovecraft's major failing is that he is like wildly racist. And that comes through in his writing very explicitly to a degree that it can be very hard to read his work in some of his writings. I did not have that sense at all with M.R. James. I don't think there was a single like story where there was some classism maybe about like rural individuals, but there wasn't this like deep virulent sense of racism running through it, which was good. In terms of the documentary ideas, the ideas of like going and like chasing down documents, solving mysteries through documents, learning from documents, and just like running around like exhuming graves. It brought back to mind a number of the ideas that A.S. Byatt's Possession includes. Even the idea of main characters who are, employed in some capacity by museums or universities. I think there was a connection there. Ramsey Campbell has a book, Ancient Images, which all deals around a film in the English countryside that was made, but then never released or perhaps never finished. And again, sort of this idea of like chasing down some primary documents, trying to find out what was going on through that. Maybe the Club Dumas, that might, less so though. Robert E. Howard's stories, The Black Stone, and there's another one. I can't remember the title of it. If I look at this, it might tell me. I can't remember it. I'll have to look it up and put it in the comments. But there's this, Robert E. Howard has a ghost story where there's a cowboy who kills a woman and possibly her husband, and then is basically haunted by her ghost to his own destruction. And then The Black Stone as well kind of calls up some of the ideas that were in M.R. James and Blackwood as well. And so his stories remind me of M.R. James. Théophile Gautier's My Phantoms, the idea of like ghosts coming out of artwork or the weird ways in which ghosts can be called up, feel analogous to James. And then the other work that I kept thinking about as I was reading his stories, particularly like the revenge ghost stories, was the Oresteia by Aeschylus, and the idea of characters like haunted by their actions, characters driven to actions that they're then haunted by. The idea of miasma and this almost sense of like revenge and violence as like pollution on a community or pollution on a house, and just the way it can be overwhelming. That carried through in some of the M.R. James stories, again more the revenge ones. But it was a fascinating read. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to exploring more of his stories and rereading probably all of those, honestly. Maybe not all straight through in 2 weeks like I did this time, but they were worth rereading. So thanks again for the recommendation. I'll be back, I don't know, maybe tomorrow, who knows. But thank you everyone, stay safe.